On Thanksgiving night, in front of the whole family, my parents gifted my sister a luxury cruise while I received a crumpled $2 lottery ticket as a cruel joke. I laughed to keep from crying, but they had no idea that scrap of paper would flip my life upside down and expose every dirty secret the Lawsons had buried. I never intended to take revenge. I simply intended to turn on the lights. My name is Jean Lawson. I am 34 years old. By day, I work as a senior contract analyst for Marrowvale Projects, a mid-sized infrastructure firm that handles everything from bridge repairs to municipal drainage systems. My job, in its essence, is to read the fine print that other people are too bored or too arrogant to notice. I look for liabilities. I look for the clauses that say one thing but mean another. I live in a 2-bedroom condo in Savannah, Georgia, which I pay for with my own money. On the first of every month, without fail, I am responsible. I am reliable. And in the grand theater production that is the Lawson family, I am the stagehand who is expected to sweep the floor while the actors take their bows. Thanksgiving at the Lawson house has never been about gratitude. It is about performance. It is a carefully curated stage play where everyone has a script, and if you miss your line, you are written out of the scene. My parents, Gordon and Linda, are the directors and producers, my older sister. Brielle is the star, the ingenue, the golden child upon whom the spotlight must always fix. And me? I am the backstage crew. I am the one who makes sure the props are in place. The lighting is flattering for everyone else, and the mess is cleaned up after the curtain falls. The only difference is that in a real theater, the crew gets paid. In this house, the payment is usually a headache and a hollow feeling in the chest that takes 3 days to go away. I arrived at my parents' house exactly at 4 p.m. Punctuality is a curse when you are related to people who view time as a suggestion. I parked my sedan behind my father's pristine SUV, took a deep breath, and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked fine. Not spectacular, not tragic, just fine. I grabbed the large glass bowl from the passenger seat and the bouquet of autumn flowers I had picked up on the way. The salad was not a bag of iceberg lettuce dumped into a bowl. It was roasted butternut squash with kale, toasted pecans, and a maple tahini dressing I had made from scratch. It took me 2 hours to prep. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots, and let myself in. The house smelled of sage and roasting turkey, a scent that should have been comforting but instead triggered a distinct tightening in my stomach. My mother was in the foyer, adjusting a wreath that was already perfectly straight. She turned when the door clicked shut. "Hello." "Mom," I said, offering a smile that did not quite reach my eyes. "Happy Thanksgiving." She looked at me. She did not look at my face first. She looked at my shoes, then my slacks, then the bowl in my hands, and finally the flowers. It was a 3-second appraisal that felt like a tax audit. "You are here," she said, as if my arrival was a mild bureaucratic error she had to correct. "And what is that?" She pointed a manicured finger at the flowers. "Just a little something for the table," I said. She took them from me, holding the stems with 2 fingers as if they might be contagious. "Oh, marigolds. They are a bit common, aren't they? I think I have a vase in the laundry room that might fit them. You can put that salad in the kitchen. We have plenty of food. Jean, you really did not need to bother." She turned her back to me before I could respond, walking away with the flowers held at arm's length. I stood there for a moment, the heavy glass bowl cold against my fingers. This was the opening act, the dismissal. It was designed to make me feel small, to remind me that my contributions were neither requested nor required. I walked to the kitchen, placed the salad on the counter next to a catering tray of stuffed mushrooms that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and took off my coat. 10 minutes later, the front door opened again. The reaction was immediate. It was physical. The air in the house changed pressure. My mother rushed from the dining room. My father actually emerged from his den, and 3 cousins who had been ignoring me suddenly perked up. Brielle had arrived. She swept in like royalty visiting the colonies. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere dress that looked like it would stain if you even thought about red wine near it. Her hair was a cascading wave of blonde perfection. Professional blowout, obviously. Behind her trailed Derek, her husband, carrying nothing but his own self-importance. "Oh, look at you," my mother shrieked. It was a sound she never made for me, a sound of pure, unadulterated delight. She pulled Brielle into a hug, careful not to crush the cashmere. "You look stunning, darling, absolutely stunning. That color is perfect on you, just perfect." A true Lawson woman, my father, Gordon, stood by the hallway entrance. He was a man who believed emotions were a sign of weakness, yet he beamed at Brielle. He patted Derek on the back. A solid, manly thump. "Good to see you, son," my father said. I stood by the kitchen island, invisible. After the hugging subsided, Brielle looked over and gave me a little wave, wiggling her fingers. "Hi, Jean. Love the sweater. Very practical." "Thanks," I said. My father turned his gaze toward me. He did not smile. He did not step forward. He just gave a sharp, single nod, acknowledging my existence in the same way one acknowledges a lamp. "Jean," he said, "since you are just standing there, go help your mother set the table. We are eating in 30 minutes. He turned back to Derek immediately. "So, tell me about this market shift you were texting me about." I watched them walk away. It was a habit so old it felt like gravity. I was 34 years old, a professional with a mortgage and a 401k. Yet the moment I stepped across this threshold, I was the hired help. I went to the dining room. I laid out the silverware, fork on the left, knife and spoon on the right, blade facing in, napkins folded into swans because my mother saw it in a magazine. I did it all with mechanical precision. Listening to the laughter drifting from the living room was Derek's stage. He was holding court near the fireplace, a glass of scotch in one hand, gesturing broadly with the other. My Uncle Ted and 2 of my male cousins were listening to him with their mouths slightly open. "The thing about traditional savings," Derek was saying, his voice loud enough to carry, "is that it is for suckers. Inflation eats you alive. You have to leverage. You have to be in high-yield private equity. I just moved 3 clients into a bridge loan fund that is returning 18% annually. Conservative estimate." "18%?" Uncle Ted asked, his eyes wide. "Is that safe?" "Safe?" Derek laughed. It was a barking, condescending sound. "Safe is staying in bed. Wealth is about calculated exposure. I can get you in." "Ted, but the window closes on Monday." I stood in the doorway, holding a stack of salad plates. I work with contracts. I work with risk assessment. When someone promises 18% safe returns in this economy, they are either lying or they are doing something illegal, usually both. There was a slickness to Derek, a desperation masked as confidence. I looked at his shoes, Italian leather, brand new. I looked at his watch, too big, too gold. He was selling something hard, and my family was buying it because they wanted to believe they were the kind of people who deserved easy money. I felt a gaze on me and turned. Aunt Tessa was sitting in the corner armchair. She was my father's younger sister, a woman who usually had a sharp tongue and a glass of Chardonnay permanently attached to her hand. But today, she looked small. She was clutching her purse in her lap, her knuckles white. She looked at me, then darted her eyes toward Derek, then back to me. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but then my mother walked in and Tessa clamped her mouth shut, looking down at the carpet, whatever that was. It was not normal. Tessa was never quiet. "Dinner is almost ready. Everyone," my mother announced, clapping her hands. "Jean, make sure the water glasses are filled. Brielle, darling, come sit next to me." I retreated to the kitchen to get the water pitcher. The noise of the party was a dull roar behind me. I filled the pitcher at the sink, the water running cold and clear. I turned off the tap and heard voices coming from the pantry area. Just around the corner, it was a small butler's pantry where we kept the wine and the extra linens. The voices were hushed, urgent. My mother and father, "Are you sure we booked the suite with the balcony?" My mother whispered. Yes, Linda. I upgraded it yesterday, my father replied. It is the diamond package, priority boarding, private dining. Good, my mother said. Brielle will love it. She needs this break. Derek says he has been working so hard. They both need to relax. And the others? Ted and the boys are in. Tessa is covering her own deposit. Barely. But she is coming. It is going to be the whole clan. I froze. The pitcher in my hand felt suddenly heavy. They were planning a trip. A big one. A cruise. The whole clan, my father had said. Then came the pause. The silence that hangs before the executioner drops the blade. What about Jean? My mother asked. Her voice was not concerned. It was calculating. There was a sigh. My father's sigh. Jean is busy. He said, You know how she is with work. Plus, it is $5,000 a head for the baseline package. It is expensive. I gripped the handle of the pitcher. I was not busy. I had 4 weeks of accrued vacation time I had been dying to use. And I had the money. I had savings. Then my mother delivered the line that would ring in my ears for the rest of the night. You are right. It is not worth it. She would just mope around and ruin the mood anyway. Let's just say it was a last-minute decision. Not worth it. Not that I could not afford it. Not that I was unavailable. But that Jean Lawson, was not worth the cost of inclusion. I was a depreciation of their asset. I was a mood killer. I felt a heat rise up the back of my neck. Hot and prickly. It was not sadness. Sadness is soft. This was hard. This was anger, calcified by 30 years of similar moments. I put the pitcher down on the counter with a loud thud. Water sloshed over the rim. I walked around the corner. My parents jumped. My mother actually put a hand to her chest, clutching her pearls. Jean, she gasped. You startled me. Do not sneak up on people like that. I looked at them. I looked at my father, who was adjusting his tie, refusing to meet my eyes. I looked at my mother, whose shock was quickly morphing into annoyance. Where are you going? I asked. My voice was steady, terrifyingly steady. My mother exchanged a look with my father, a quick, silent communication that said, Handle this. Oh, it is just a little getaway, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Nothing for you to worry about. A cruise? I said. You are all going on a cruise. My father cleared his throat. He puffed out his chest. Trying to regain his authority. We are discussing a family vacation for the spring. Yes. And I am not invited. I stated, it was not a question. My mother sighed. The long, suffering sigh of a martyr dealing with a difficult toddler. Oh, Jean, stop it. Do not be dramatic. We just know how independent you are. You have your little job and your condo and your routine. We did not want to burden you with the obligation. You know you do not enjoy these big social things. You are better off doing your own thing. That is just who you are. You are independent. There it was. The word, independent. In any other context, it is a compliment. It means strong. It means capable. But in the Lawson family lexicon, independent was a polite synonym for unwanted. It was the label they slapped on me to justify leaving me behind. They did not exclude me because they were cruel. Oh no. They excluded me because I was so very independent. They were doing me a favor. They were respecting my boundaries. Boundaries I had never set, but which they had constructed around me like a cage. I looked at them. I saw the relief in their eyes as they settled into this narrative. They had absolved themselves. Right, I said. Independent. We should get to the table, my father said, checking his watch, eager to escape the awkwardness. The turkey is getting cold. He brushed past me without looking back. My mother lingered for a second, smoothing the front of her dress. Bring the water. Jean, she said, and try to smile. It is Thanksgiving. For heaven's sake. She walked away, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air like a toxin. I stood alone in the butler's pantry. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of keeping the scream inside my throat. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to throw the pitcher through the window. I wanted to grab them by their shoulders and shake them until they saw me. but I did not. I took a breath. I counted to 3. I picked up the water pitcher. I wiped the spilled droplets from the counter because I am Jean Lawson, and I clean up messes. I walked out into the dining room where 25 of my relatives were taking their seats. Brielle was laughing at something Derek had said, her head thrown back, her throat exposed and pale. My father was pouring wine. My mother was directing people to their assigned seats. Jean, you are down at the end, next to the children's table, my mother called out, pointing to a folding chair squeezed into the corner. I walked to my seat. I sat down. I placed the water pitcher in the center of the table. I folded my hands in my lap. I was the audience. I was the crew. I was the independent variable that did not fit the equation. But the play was just starting, and as I sat there, watching them toast to family and prosperity, I had no idea that the script was about to change. I had no idea that the crumpled piece of paper in my pocket, the one I had almost thrown away, was about to burn this entire theater to the ground. I watched Derek stand up, tapping his fork against his crystal wine glass. Clink, clink, clink. Attention, everyone, he boomed, his face flushed with alcohol and arrogance. Before we eat, Gordon has a few words. My father stood up. The room went silent. The lights dimmed in my mind. The curtain was rising on the main act, and I was just waiting for my cue to disappear. Or so I thought. My father tapped his spoon against the side of his wine glass again. The sound was sharp and thin, cutting through the low murmur of 28 separate conversations. I counted them. I always counted the people at these gatherings. It was a habit I picked up when I was a teenager, a way to ground myself in objective reality when the emotional atmosphere became too slippery to hold on to. 28 relatives. 28 witnesses to whatever sermon Gordon Lawson was about to deliver. The room fell silent. My father stood at the head of the table, his chest puffed out beneath his starched shirt. He looked like a man who was about to announce a merger, not a man addressing his wife and children. He let the silence hang for a moment, savoring the attention. He loved this. He loved the control. Family, he began, his voice dropping an octave to simulate gravitas. He looked around the table, making deliberate eye contact with the successful cousins, with Uncle Ted, and lingering fondly on Derek. He did not look at the children's table. He certainly did not look at me. Family is the bedrock of civilization. It is the fortress we build against the chaos of the world. In this house, we value hard work. We value loyalty. We value the kind of success that brings honor to the Lawson name. He raised his glass. The red wine caught the light of the chandelier, looking dark and heavy. This year has been a year of triumph for many of us. Derek and Brielle have expanded their portfolio significantly. Brielle has been featured in the local lifestyle magazine for her charity work. We are proud. We are so incredibly proud. A ripple of polite applause went around the table. I clapped too. My hands made a hollow, dry sound. But, my father continued, raising a hand to silence the room, words are cheap. We believe in showing our appreciation. We believe in rewarding excellence. He nodded to my mother. This was her cue. She stood up, her face glowing with a frantic, eager energy. She reached behind her chair and produced a large, thick envelope. It was cream-colored, made of heavy cardstock, the kind used for wedding invitations or legal settlements. It was tied with a gold ribbon. Brielle, darling, come here, my mother cooed. Brielle stood up. She smoothed her cashmere dress, feigning a look of wide-eyed innocence, as if she did not know exactly what was happening. She walked to the head of the table. My mother handed her the envelope with both hands, like it was a holy relic. Open it, my father commanded. Read it out loud. Brielle untied the ribbon. She slid a finger under the flap and pulled out a glossy brochure and a sleek itinerary printed on thick paper. She gasped. It was a theatrical gasp, one hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, she breathed. Mom, Dad, is this real? Read it, my mother urged, beaming. It is the Royal Seas Voyager package. Brielle read, her voice trembling with excitement. 14 days, the Mediterranean circuit, The diamond suite? She looked up, her eyes wet with happy tears. The diamond suite, my father confirmed, his voice booming so everyone in the back could hear. All inclusive, private butler, private dining, priority excursions. We wanted you and Derek to have the best. You earned it. Derek leaned back in his chair, swirling his drink, looking smugly satisfied. That is incredible. Gordon, Derek said. That is top tier. My father nodded. It cost $13,000. But who is counting? For my daughter. Nothing is too much. $13,000. The number hung in the air. A collective gasp went through the room. My cousins exchanged looks of envy and awe. Uncle Ted whistled low. $13,000 was more than the down payment on my condo. It was a significant amount of money to drop on a holiday gift. Even for them, it was a statement. It was a flex. Thank you, Brielle squealed, rushing to hug them both. Thank you so much. The applause this time was louder. It was raucous. It was the sound of people worshiping success. I clapped. I kept my face neutral. I focused on the centerpiece. A cornucopia of wax fruit that looked almost real until you saw the seams in the plastic grapes. Then, the applause died down. The room settled. My mother remained standing. She looked down at the table, where a second envelope lay. It was not cream-colored. It was white. It was thin. It was the standard size of a bill or a junk mail flyer. Jean, my mother said. Her tone changed instantly. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a cool, dutiful tone. It was the voice one uses when addressing a slow-witted employee. Come here. We have something for you, too. The air in the room shifted. It became tight, uncomfortable. Everyone knew the hierarchy. Everyone knew that if Brielle got gold, I would get tin. But they watched anyway. They watched with a morbid curiosity, like drivers slowing down to look at a fender bender. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. I walked the length of the table. It felt like walking the plank. I could feel the eyes on me. I could feel Aunt Tessa looking at her plate. I could feel Derek's smirk burning into the side of my face. I reached my parents. My mother picked up the thin white envelope. She did not use two hands. She held it out with two fingers, casually, as if she were handing me a grocery receipt. Here, she said. I took it. It was light. There was something small and stiff inside. Go on, my mother said, gesturing vaguely. Open it. We do not want you to feel left out. I tore the flap. There was no ribbon, no glossy brochure. I reached in and pulled out the contents. It was a lottery ticket, a single. Red and green scratch-off ticket, the kind you buy at a gas station when you are waiting for the pump to finish. It had a picture of a cartoon snowman on it. The price was printed clearly in the corner, $2. I held it in my hand. The paper felt gritty. A $2 ticket against a $13,000 cruise. I looked at my mother. I waited for the punchline. I waited for her to say, just kidding, check your other pocket. But her face was perfectly serious. In fact, she looked pleased with herself. We thought this fits your situation, she said. Her voice was loud. She wanted everyone to hear. My situation? I asked. My voice was calm, but my ears were ringing. Well, yes, she said, tilting her head. You are always struggling with your little budget, living paycheck to paycheck. We thought, why not? Maybe you will get lucky. It is a bit of hope. Jean, God knows you need it. The silence that followed was absolute. It was not the silence of awe. It was the silence of embarrassment. Even the cousins, who usually ignored me, looked down at their laps. It was so blatant, so aggressively cruel, that for a second, nobody knew how to react. Then Derek cleared his throat. Hey, do not knock it. Jean, he called out from his seat. Someone has to win, right? Though, honestly, luck is not a strategy. Luck is for people who do not know how to calculate risk. He laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. I mean, I do not buy them, he continued, addressing the room now. The odds are 1 in 3 million. You have a better chance of being struck by lightning twice. But hey, For someone in Jean's tax bracket, I guess that is what serves as an investment plan. A few people chuckled. It was a nervous, subservient sound. They laughed because Derek was rich, and in this family, you laughed at the rich man's jokes if you wanted to be invited back next year. I stood there, holding the snowman ticket. My thumb brushed against the latex coating over the numbers. I felt a stinging sensation behind my eyes. The prelude to tears, but I would not cry. I would rather die right there on the Persian rug than let them see me cry. I summoned the smile. It was a reflex I had honed since I was 7 years old. It was a muscle memory. You lift the corners of the mouth. You crinkle the eyes slightly. You disengage the heart. You become a mirror, reflecting back whatever they want to see so they will stop looking at you. Thank you, I said. My voice did not shake. That is very thoughtful. I turned to go back to my seat. I wanted to sit down. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. No. The voice was frail, cracked, but startlingly loud. Everyone turned. At the far end of the table, near the kitchen door, my grandmother, Rose Whitaker, was trying to stand up. She was 82 years old. She was frail, her hands twisted by arthritis. Her mind often drifting in and out of the present like a radio losing signal. But right now, her eyes were clear. They were blazing. She pushed herself up against the table, her knuckles white. No, she said again. That is not right. Linda, that is not right. My mother's head snapped toward her. The sweet, condescending mask my mother wore slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing pure irritation. Mother, sit down, my mother snapped. You gave the other one a boat, Rose said, pointing a shaking finger at Brielle. You gave Jean a piece of paper. You are shaming her. You are shaming my granddaughter. The room was frozen. Grandma Rose never spoke up. She was usually treated as a piece of furniture, fed and watered and placed in the corner. My mother moved instantly. She crossed the room with a speed that was almost predatory. She reached Rose before anyone else could move. Okay, that is enough, my mother said, her voice dropping to a hiss that only those close by could hear. You are having an episode. Mother, you are tired. You do not know what you are saying. I am not tired, Rose cried out. I see what you are doing. You think I do not see? My mother grabbed Rose's arm. It looked like a gentle guide, but I saw the grip. It was firm. It was controlling. Come on, my mother said loudly. For the benefit of the audience, Grandma needs to lie down. She is overwhelmed by the excitement. Too much sugar in the cranberry sauce. I think. She began to pull Rose away from the table, steering her toward the hallway that led to the guest room on the first floor. Gordon, handle the wine, my mother commanded over her shoulder. My father immediately picked up a bottle and started filling glasses, loudly asking Uncle Ted about his golf swing, creating a wall of noise to drown out the scene. I watched them. I was the only one really watching. Everyone else was pretending to be fascinated by their turkey. As my mother dragged her past me, Rose dug her heels in. She was weak, but she was fighting. She turned her head, her eyes locked onto mine. They were blue, pale and watery. But in that moment, they were desperate. They were trying to transmit a lifetime of warnings in a single second. Jean, she gasped. Mother, stop it, my mother hissed, pulling harder. Rose looked at me. She did not struggle against the grip anymore. She just focused every ounce of her remaining energy into her lips. She mouthed 3 words. No sound came out, but the shape of the syllables was unmistakable. Call Ruth Calder. I stared at her. I did not know the name. I had never heard of a Ruth Calder in my life. Was it a doctor? A friend from her nursing home? A delusion? But the look in Rose's eyes was not delusional. It was terrified, and it was urgent. My mother shoved Rose through the doorway and kicked the door shut with her heel. The lock clicked. I stood there, clutching the $2 lottery ticket in one hand. The room slowly returned to its noisy equilibrium. Derek was laughing again. Brielle was showing her brochure to a cousin. My father was pouring wine. I sat down in my folding chair. I placed the ticket on the table, next to my fork. The cartoon snowman grinned up at me, mocking and grotesque. Ruth Calder. Remember that name? I repeated the name in my head. I etched it into my memory. I did not know who she was. But I knew one thing for certain. My grandmother had just used her last moment of clarity to give me a weapon, and I was going to find out how to use it. I looked at the ticket. I looked at the cruise brochure in Brielle's hand. I looked at my mother re-entering the room, smoothing her hair, smiling as if she had just taken out the trash. I picked up the ticket and slipped it into my pocket. The humiliation was still burning my skin, hot and shameful, but beneath it, something else was starting to form. A question, a curiosity, and a name that echoed in the silence of my mind like a gunshot. Ruth Calder. The dinner party eventually dissolved into that chaotic, heavy phase where everyone is too full to move but too stimulated to leave. The air in the dining room was thick with the smell of coffee, expensive cognac, and the lingering scent of roasted meat. My relatives had migrated to the living room, forming little clusters of self-congratulation. They were buzzing with the energy of the cruise announcement. I could hear them from the kitchen. They were discussing cabin upgrades, shore excursions in Italy, and whether the drink package was worth the extra cost. I was not part of those conversations. I was exactly where I was expected to be. I was standing at the sink, my hands submerged in hot, soapy water, scrubbing the roasting pan that my mother refused to put in the dishwasher. "Leave it for Jean," she had said as she ushered the guests out of the dining room. "She has a system." My system was apparently to be the invisible engine that kept their world running while they ignored me. I scraped, I scrubbed, and I dried. The physical labor was actually grounding. It gave me something to do with the adrenaline that was still coursing through my veins from the lottery ticket incident. I had moved the ticket from my pocket to my purse, tucking it inside the zippered lining where I kept my emergency cash. Every time I thought about it, a little jolt of electricity went up my spine, but I pushed it down. Now was not the time. Now was the time to play the role. By 9 o'clock, the kitchen was spotless. I wiped down the granite countertops until they gleamed. I walked into the dining room to check for stragglers. The table was clear, except for one wine glass and a dessert plate left on the sideboard near the hallway door. I recognized the glass. It was the heavy crystal tumbler my father used for his evening scotch. I picked them up. The path of least resistance would have been to take them back to the kitchen, but the dishwasher was already running. I decided to return the glass to where it belonged. My father kept a small bar cart in his home office, a room that was usually treated with the reverence of a cathedral. I walked down the hallway. The laughter from the living room sounded distant here. Muffled by the heavy oak doors, I reached the office. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open with my hip, balancing the plate and glass in my hands. The room was dark, illuminated only by the amber glow of a street lamp filtering through the heavy drapes. It smelled of cedar, old paper, and the expensive cigars my father smoked when he felt like a titan of industry. I walked over to the mahogany desk to set the glass down. That was when I saw it. Usually, my father's desk was a model of military precision, pens aligned, papers stacked at right angles, nothing out of place. But tonight, in the excitement of the holiday and the grand cruise reveal, his discipline had slipped. A stack of mail had been shoved hastily under the edge of his leather blotter. It was not a neat stack. It was a frantic, messy pile, as if someone had swept it off the surface in a panic just before guests arrived. One long, white envelope had slid out and was hanging precariously off the edge of the desk. I put the glass down on a coaster. I looked at the envelope. It had a red stamp on the front. Final notice. I work in contracts. I work in risk. I know what red ink on an envelope means. It means the polite conversation is over. It means the legal machinery is starting to turn. My heart did a strange double beat. I looked at the return address. It was from a collection agency based in Atlanta, a firm I recognized from my work. They were aggressive. They did not send Christmas cards. I should have walked away. I should have turned around, closed the door, and driven back to my quiet, solvent life. But the memory of the $2 lottery ticket flashed in my mind, the memory of Derek's sneer, the memory of my mother saying the ticket fit my situation. I reached out and pulled the envelope from the stack. It was addressed to Gordon Lawson. I opened it. The letter was brief and brutal. It was a demand for payment on a credit line that was 90 days past due. The amount was $14,000. $14,000. My father had just announced a $13,000 cruise gift for my sister. He had just stood in front of the family and toasted to prosperity. And here, in his private sanctum, was a letter threatening legal action for a sum almost identical to the cost of that gift. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. I looked at the rest of the pile under the blotter. I pulled it out. It was a cascade of financial disaster. There were overdue notices for the country club membership. There was a letter from the bank warning of an overdraft on the primary checking account. There was a notice that the life insurance policy had lapsed due to non-payment. My parents were broke. They were not just short on cash. They were drowning. The facade of the wealthy, successful Lawson patriarch was held together by debt and denial. But then I saw the folder at the bottom of the stack. It was a blue legal folder, thicker than the rest. It did not look like mail. It looked like business. I opened it. The document on top was titled, Bridge Loan Agreement. I froze. I deal with contracts every day. I know what a bridge loan is. It is a short-term, high-interest loan, usually used by real estate developers who need cash fast to close a deal before they can secure long-term financing. In the consumer world, it is one step above a loan shark. It is what you sign when no reputable bank will touch you. I scanned the terms. The lender was a company called Apex Capital Solutions. I looked at the principal amount, $250,000. I looked at the interest rate, 24%. I felt the air leave my lungs. 24% interest. That was predatory. That was suicide. Who would sign this? I looked at the signature page. There was my father's signature. Gordon Lawson, big and looping, written with the confidence of a man who thought he could outrun math. And then I saw the witness line. Consulting broker, Derek Harlan. My hands started to shake. Derek, my brother-in-law, the investment genius. He had brokered this loan. I flipped to the fee disclosure page. There it was, buried in paragraph 12. A broker origination fee of 4%, payable to Harlan Wealth Management upon funding. Derek had not just let my father sign a death warrant, he had taken a $10,000 commission for handing him the pen. The pieces started clicking together with a sickening precision. The talk of investments, the pressure on Uncle Ted to buy in. Derek was feeding off them. He was bleeding them dry while they thanked him for the privilege. But why did my father need $250,000? And how did he get approved for a loan like this with his credit clearly in the toilet? I turned to the page labeled Collateral. Bridge loans are always secured. You have to put up something real, something worth more than the cash. I expected to see my parents' house listed. It was a nice house, paid off years ago, or so I thought. But the address listed under collateral property was not the house I was standing in. It was 42 Ocean View Drive, Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. I stopped breathing. That was Grandma Rose's house. It was a historic cottage she had owned since the 70s. It was her pride. It was her only real asset. The place she talked about leaving to the grandchildren. The place she planned to return to if her health ever improved. It was mortgage-free. It was prime real estate. They had put up Grandma's house as collateral for a high-risk loan to fund their lifestyle. But how? They could not just pledge a house they did not own. Rose was still alive. She was in a facility. Yes, but she was cogent enough to know she hadn't signed this. I flipped the pages frantically. I was looking for the authorization. I found a copy of a power of attorney document. It gave my mother, Linda Lawson, full control over Rose Whitaker's financial assets. It was dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. I remembered what Ruth called her, the name Grandma had whispered, was supposed to be a lawyer. Grandma had told me to call a lawyer. She knew. She must have suspected they were making a move. I felt a wave of nausea. This was not just bad financial management. This was elder abuse. They were stealing her home to pay off debts and buy luxury cruises. but the worst was yet to come. I turned to the final addendum of the contract. It was titled, Personal Guarantor. Sometimes, the collateral is not enough. Sometimes, the lender looks at the borrower, sees a man who cannot pay his light bill, and demands a cosigner, someone with a steady income, someone with a clean credit history, someone employed. I looked at the name printed on the guarantor line. Jean Lawson. My vision blurred. I blinked, trying to clear it, praying I had misread it. But the letters remained. Jean Lawson. Social Security number. Mine. Current address. My condo. Employer. Marrowvale Projects. And there, at the bottom, was a signature. Jean Lawson. It was written in blue ink. It had the slant of my handwriting. It had the specific way I crossed my T's. To a stranger. To a bank clerk. To a judge. It would look perfect. But it was not mine. I had never seen this document before in my life. I had never spoken to Apex Capital Solutions. I had never agreed to be on the hook for $250,000 of debt at 24% interest. They had forged my signature, my own father, my own mother, and Derek. They had sat in a room, discussed their financial ruin, and decided that the solution was to frame me. They had used my credit, the credit I had built by driving a 10-year-old car and eating homemade salads, to secure the money they needed to keep pretending they were rich. If they defaulted, and with these terms, they absolutely would default, the lender would not just take Grandma's house. They would come for me. They would garnish my wages. They would put a lien on my condo. They would destroy the one thing I had that was truly mine, my stability. I felt a cold, hard clarity settle over me. The emotion vanished. The hurt vanished. What was left was the analyst, the person who finds the loophole, the person who spots the liability. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I did not have much time. I could hear movement in the hallway. I opened the camera app. I switched it to document mode. I started photographing. Click, the cover page. Click, the default notice. Click, the loan terms. Click, the collateral page with Grandma's address. Click, the power of attorney. Click, the guarantor page. I took 3 photos of the signature, zooming in on the pen strokes. I captured the date next to the signature. It was dated 4 days ago. 4 days ago, I was at work. I had electronic logs proving I was in a meeting at the time this was supposedly signed. My hands were shaking, but the camera was steady. I was building a case file. Suddenly, I heard the floorboards creak right outside the door. Heavy steps. My father's walk. Panic spiked in my chest, sharp and sudden. If he caught me, he would not just be angry, he would be dangerous. A man who steals his mother's house and forges his daughter's signature is a man who has crossed a moral event horizon. He could not know that I knew. Not yet. I shoved the folder back to the bottom of the stack. I grabbed the random envelopes and slid them under the blotter, trying to replicate the messy arrangement I had found. I spun around, away from the desk. I grabbed the crystal glass I had brought in. The door handle turned. I took a step toward the bookshelf. Pretending to examine the titles, the door opened. My father stood there. His tie was loosened, his face flushed with wine. He blinked, surprised to see a silhouette in his sanctuary. "Jean?" he said. His voice was thick. "What are you doing in here?" I turned slowly. I held up the glass. "I was just bringing this back," I said. My voice sounded calm. It sounded bored. "I found it on the sideboard. I know you hate it when the crystal gets mixed in with the regular dishes." My father stared at me. His eyes darted to the desk, then back to me. He was trying to remember if he had left anything out. He was trying to gauge how long I had been there. "Oh," he said. "Right. Good." He walked over to the desk. He placed his hand on the leather blotter, covering the spot where the mail was hidden. It was a protective, instinctive gesture. "You can leave it," he said. "Go on. Your mother is asking if you have finished in the kitchen." "I am done," I said. "I was just leaving." I walked past him. I could smell the stale wine on his breath. I could smell the fear coming off him, the desperate, acrid scent of a man living a lie. He did not look at me as I passed. He was staring at the papers under his hand. I walked down the hallway. I did not run. I walked at a measured, steady pace. I went to the closet and got my coat. I walked into the living room. I am heading out. I announced to the room. My mother looked up from the sofa where she was showing Brielle pictures of cruise cabins on her iPad. "Already?" she said. She did not sound disappointed. She sounded relieved. "It is late," I said. "Thank you for dinner. Drive safe." Derek called out, raising his glass. "Do not spend all your lottery winnings in one place." A few people laughed. I smiled. It was the last time I would ever smile for them. I walked out the front door. I walked down the gravel driveway to my car. The night air was crisp and cold. It felt clean. I got into my sedan. I locked the doors. I put the key in the ignition, but I did not turn it immediately. I sat there in the dark, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I visualized the document again, the signature. They had sold me. They had sold Grandma, and they were currently inside, celebrating the proceeds of the sale. I started the car. I backed out of the driveway. I did not turn on the radio. I needed silence. I needed to think. As I drove onto the highway, the streetlights passing overhead in a rhythmic blur, a map began to construct itself in my mind. It was a map of the enemy territory. Derek was the architect. He needed the commission, and he needed to keep the family solvent so his wife wouldn't realize he was a fraud. My parents were the willing accomplices, sacrificing their morality to maintain their status. Grandma Rose was the victim, and I was the patsy, the insurance policy, the one they assumed was too stupid, too passive, or too loyal to fight back. They thought I was independent. They thought I was alone. I reached for my purse on the passenger seat. I felt the shape of the lottery ticket through the leather. $100 million. I had the means. And now, thanks to the photos in my phone, I had the ammunition. I was not going to sleep tonight. I had a lot of work to do. I had to research Ruth Calder. I had to find out who owned the title to the Hilton Head house. I had to draft an affidavit regarding my whereabouts on the day the document was signed. I merged onto the interstate. The city lights of Savannah twinkled in the distance, indifferent and beautiful. They wanted a show? They wanted a performance? Fine, I would give them one, but I was done being the stagehand. I was rewriting the script, and in my version, the ending was going to be very different. 3 days. That was how long it took for the adrenaline of the discovery in my father's study to metabolize into a cold, hard knot of dread in my stomach. For 72 hours, I had functioned on autopilot. I went to work. I reviewed contracts for drainage culverts and municipal piping. I nodded at colleagues. I ate bland sandwiches at my desk. But in my head, I was constantly replaying the image of that forged signature. I was running calculations on legal fees, bankruptcy procedures, and the likelihood of my own parents testifying against me to save their skins. I was preparing for a war I did not have the resources to fight. It was Sunday evening when I finally came up for air. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, pressing against your eardrums. I was standing in my kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil, staring blankly at the granite countertop. That was when I saw it, the white envelope, the thin, dismissive gift from Thanksgiving. I had tossed it onto the counter when I got home that night, right next to the fruit bowl, and in my panic over the bridge loan, it had blended into the background clutter. It was already looking a bit sad. A coffee stain ringed one corner where I had carelessly set down a mug. It looked exactly like what it was intended to be, a piece of trash. A $2 insult wrapped in a gesture of fake charity. I reached out to throw it away. I actually had the trash can lid open with my foot. But then, a voice in my head, maybe Derek's sneering voice, maybe my mother's pitying one, stopped me. Maybe you will get lucky. It is a bit of hope. Jean, I let the trash lid clang shut. I picked up the ticket. The snowman mascot grinned up at me, oblivious to the fact that the family who bought him had committed a felony against the woman holding him. I grabbed a quarter from the jar where I kept my laundry change. I scratched the coating off the bottom of the ticket to reveal the barcode. I did not even scratch the main numbers. I did not want the suspense. I just wanted the machine to tell me I had won nothing so I could toss it and go to bed. I pulled out my phone and opened the state lottery app. I tapped the Scan Ticket button. The camera frame opened on the screen. I hovered the phone over the barcode. The camera struggled to focus in the dim kitchen light. I shifted my weight, annoyed. "Come on," I muttered. The phone buzzed. A green box appeared around the barcode. Then the screen changed. Usually, when you scan a losing ticket, it says, "Sorry, not a winner," in gray text. When you win $5, it flashes a little "Congratulations" graphic. This time, the screen went completely gold. Confetti animations exploded across the display. And in the center, in bold, white numbers, a figure appeared. It was not $5. It was not $500. It was a 1 followed by 8 zeros. I stared at it. I blinked. I wiped the screen with my thumb, thinking it was a glitch, a smudge, a joke. Jackpot winner. Estimated value, $100 million. I did not scream. I did not drop the phone. I did not start dancing around the kitchen. I went absolutely still. It was a stillness so profound it felt like my heart had stopped beating. I felt the blood drain out of my face, leaving my skin cold and prickly. The kettle behind me started to whistle, a rising shriek of steam, but it sounded like it was miles away. I reached back and turned off the stove without looking. $100 million. I looked at the ticket in my hand. It was just a piece of paper. It was flimsy. It had a coffee stain. It was the most valuable object I had ever touched, and it was sitting on a counter next to a half-eaten banana. My brain refused to process the number as money. It processed it as data, as a variable that had just shifted the entire equation of my life. I unlocked my laptop. My fingers were cold, stiff. I typed in the address for the official state lottery website. I needed verification. The app could be buggy. The app could be wrong. I navigated to the winning numbers page for the Thanksgiving draw. 4, 12, 18, 29, 41, Powerball, 7. I picked up the quarter again. My hand was shaking now. A fine, high-frequency tremor. I scratched the latex off the main play area of the ticket. First number, 4. Second number, 12. Third number, 18. I stopped. I had to put the coin down because I could not hold it steady. I took a breath that shuddered in my chest. I scratched the rest. 29, 41, and the Powerball, 7. It was a match. A perfect, impossible match. I sat down on the floor. I did not bother with a chair. I just slid down the front of the cabinets until I hit the linoleum. I pulled my knees to my chest. $100 million. If I took the lump sum, after taxes, it would be somewhere around $40 or $50 million. $50 million. That was enough to buy Marrowvale Projects. It was enough to buy the apartment complex I lived in. It was enough to pay off the $250,000 bridge loan my father had taken out in my name 200 times over. The thought of the loan snapped me back to reality. The money, the loan, the forgery. My parents had given me this ticket. My mother had handed it to me with a look of disdain, using my own money, or money she had stolen from my credit line, to buy it. They had bought their own destruction, if they knew. The thought made my stomach lurch. If they knew I had this ticket, the dynamic would not shift. It would explode. Derek would be at my door in 5 minutes with a wealth management plan. My father would suddenly remember how much he loved his independent daughter. My mother would be picking out drapes for the mansion she expected me to buy her. And then, once they had access to the accounts, once they had their hooks in, they would bleed me dry just like they were bleeding Grandma Rose. No, the word was a growl in my empty kitchen. No. My first instinct was not celebration. It was defense. Hide, lock, protect. I stood up. I walked to the front door and engaged the deadbolt. I checked the windows. I felt exposed, as if the walls of my condo had suddenly turned to glass. I needed a safe, I did not have a safe. I went to my bookshelf. I pulled out a thick, boring hardback, a textbook on municipal water treatment from my college days. I opened it to page 100. I placed the ticket inside. I closed the book. I put it back on the shelf, wedged between a dictionary and a biography of Roosevelt. It was not enough. I needed a plan. I needed armor. I went back to my laptop. I opened a private browsing window. I did not search for mansions for sale or luxury cars. I searched how to claim lottery winnings anonymously in Georgia. I searched blind trusts for lottery winners. I searched, can creditors take lottery winnings if identity is stolen? I read for hours. The blue light of the screen was the only illumination in the room. I learned that in my state, I could not just hide my name easily. It required legal maneuvering. It required a trust. It required a representative to claim the prize on behalf of that trust so that Jean Lawson never appeared on the giant check or the 6 o'clock news. I needed a lawyer, a specific kind of lawyer, not a strip mall accident attorney. I needed a shark who swam in the deep, quiet waters of high net worth estate planning. And then the memory hit me. Thanksgiving, the dining room, my grandmother being dragged away by my mother, her desperate, watery blue eyes locking onto mine, her lips moving silently. The name echoed, urgent, unavoidable. I opened a new tab. I typed in the name, Ruth Calder. The search results were sparse, which was a good sign. High-end lawyers do not need SEO. I found a website for a firm, Calder, Vance & Associates. The office was located in a historic building in downtown Savannah, not far from the federal courthouse. The bio for Ruth Calder was brief, specializing in complex estate litigation, asset protection, and high-value trusts. 40 years of experience. There was a photo. She looked to be in her 60s, with steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that looked like they could spot a typo in a contract from across the room. She looked formidable. Grandma Rose knew her. Grandma Rose trusted her. I wrote down the number. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the sirens in the distance. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the numbers. 4, 12, 18. The next morning, Monday. I called in sick to work. It was the first time I had done so in 5 years. I waited until 9 o'clock exactly. I dialed the number for Calder, Vance Associates. A receptionist answered. Calder, Vance, how may I direct your call? I need to speak to Ruth Calder, I said. My voice sounded strange to me, deeper, steadier than usual. Ms. Calder is in court this morning, the receptionist said, her tone polite but dismissive. I can put you through to her paralegal to schedule a consultation in a few weeks. No, I said. Please tell her Rose Whitaker's granddaughter is calling, and tell her I have a situation regarding the Lawson estate and a very time-sensitive asset. There was a pause, a long pause. Hold on one moment. Please, I waited. The hold music was classical. Vivaldi. 2 minutes later, the line clicked. This is Ruth Calder. The voice was exactly as I had imagined, low, husky from years of arguing in courtrooms, but sharp as a razor. It was a voice that did not waste syllables. Ms. Calder, I said. My name is Jean Lawson. My grandmother, Rose, told me to call you. I have been wondering when you would call, Ruth said. I heard about the incident at Thanksgiving. How is she? She is contained, I said, choosing the word carefully. But that is not the only reason I'm calling. I found the paperwork. Ms. Calder, the bridge loan, the house in Hilton Head, and the forgery of my signature. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. You have proof? I have photos of the documents, I said. But the situation has become more complicated, significantly more complicated. How so? Ruth asked. I took a breath. I walked over to the bookshelf and looked at the spine of the water treatment textbook. I cannot discuss it on the phone, I said. But let's just say that my ability to fight this fraud has just increased by about 100 million%. Literally. Silence. Absolute silence on the line. Then, Ruth spoke. Her voice dropped even lower. Are you telling me you are holding the ticket from the Thanksgiving draw? I had not said it, but she knew. She was sharp. Yes, I whispered. Jean, she said. The use of my first name was deliberate. It was in command. Listen to me very carefully. Do not tell anyone. Do not tell your parents. Do not tell a friend. Do not even tell your cat. Is the ticket safe? It is hidden, I said. Get it to a safety deposit box at a bank where you do not have an existing account, she ordered. Today, then come to my office. Use the side entrance on Abercorn Street. We have a lot of work to do. Okay, I said. And Jean? Yes? Do not sign anything. Do not answer your phone if it is your family. If they find out about this money before we secure the structure, they will use that forged guarantee to tie your winnings up in litigation for years. We need to move fast, and we need to move quietly. I understand, I said. I hung up. I felt a strange sense of relief. I had a general. I was not alone in the trench anymore, but the world outside was already moving. By noon, the news broke. I was driving to a bank across town, a small credit union where my parents would never think to look, when the radio DJ interrupted the song. Breaking news for all you dreamers out there. The State Lottery Commission has confirmed that the single winning ticket for the $100 million Thanksgiving jackpot was sold right here in Chatham County. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. The winning ticket was purchased at the Quick Stop on Abercorn, just south of the mall. Check your pockets. Folks, someone in Savannah is walking around with a fortune and doesn't know it yet. The Quick Stop on Abercorn. That was the gas station 3 blocks from my parents' house. It was where my father filled up his SUV. It was where my mother bought her emergency wine. The net was closing. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down. Mom calling. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, Mom calling. I ignored it again. Then, a text message popped up on the screen. The preview flashed for a second before fading. But I saw enough. Mom. Jean, are you at work? I was just cleaning the kitchen and I remembered that silly ticket I gave you. Do you still have it? I think I might have given you the wrong envelope by mistake. Call me. I stared at the screen. I might have given you the wrong envelope. The audacity was breathtaking. She did not know I had won. She just knew the winning ticket was sold at their store. And she remembered handing me a ticket purchased from that exact location. She was fishing. She was casting a line into the dark water, hoping to hook the daughter she had dismissed as a failure just 3 days ago. Call me. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who has just realized that the predator is walking into a trap. I did not reply. I reached over and turned the phone off completely. I pulled into the parking lot of the credit union. I had a safety deposit box to open. I had a lawyer to meet. Let them call. Let them text. Let them panic. The independent daughter was busy. The law offices of Calder, Vance and Associates, were located in a brownstone building that smelled of lemon polish and old decisions. It was the kind of place that did not have a website listed on the front door, just a small brass plaque that looked like it had been there since the Civil War. I stepped inside, leaving the humid Savannah air and the buzzing anxiety of the outside world behind me. The reception area was quiet. There was no radio playing the news about the mystery lottery winner. There was just the ticking of a grandfather clock and a receptionist who looked like she categorized people by their tax brackets. I gave my name. She nodded, pressed a button on her desk, and 3 seconds later, a heavy oak door opened. Ruth Calder stood in the frame. She was shorter than I expected, but she took up all the space in the room. She wore a charcoal suit that was tailored to within an inch of its life, and her hair was a steel-gray helmet of authority. She did not smile. She looked at me with eyes that were intelligent, assessing, and utterly devoid of patience for nonsense. "Come in, Jean," she said. Her voice was gravel and silk. I walked into her office. It was lined with books, floor to ceiling. Not the decorative kind you see in model homes, but the kind that have cracked spines and sticky notes protruding from the pages. This was a room where arguments were built and lives were dismantled. I sat in one of the leather chairs opposite her desk. It creaked under me, a sound that felt loud in the silence. Ruth walked around her desk and sat down. She folded her hands on the blotter. "You look like her," she said. I blinked. "Like who?" "Rose," she said, "around the eyes. You have the same look of someone who is constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop." She opened a file folder that was already sitting on her desk. "Your grandmother called me 6 months ago," Ruth began, skipping the pleasantries. "She asked me to come to the facility. She said she wanted to review her estate plan because she was concerned." "Concerned about what?" I asked. "About her daughter," Ruth said. She looked me dead in the eye. "About your mother." Rose was lucid. "Jean." She was sharp. She told me that Linda had been asking questions about the deed to the Hilton Head house. She said Linda had been complaining about cash flow, about how expensive the facility was, about how it was a waste of assets to have a property sitting empty. I felt a pang of sadness. Grandma knew. She had been watching her own daughter circle like a shark, and she had been powerless to stop it physically. "So she hired you?" I asked. "She retained me to watch," Ruth corrected. She knew she could not stop Linda from being Linda, but she wanted to ensure that there were safeguards. Ruth pulled a document from the file and slid it across the desk toward me. "Look at this." I picked it up. It was a bank document. It established a small savings account, funded with what looked like proceeds from sold jewelry and some old bonds. The balance was not huge. It was $25,000. Read the beneficiary line. Ruth said, I looked, "Payable on death, to Jean Lawson." "It is a POD account," Ruth explained. "It bypasses probate. It bypasses the will. It bypasses your mother. Rose set this up 5 years ago, and she topped it up 6 months ago. She told me, Jean is the only one who brings me flowers without asking for a check. If I die, I want her to have enough to walk away." I stared at the paper. The numbers blurred slightly. It was not about the $25,000. I was currently sitting on a lottery ticket worth 4,000 times that amount. It was the fact that Grandma Rose, in her fog and her frailty, had seen me. She had known I was trapped. She had tried, in her own small way, to give me an exit strategy. She knew. I whispered. She knew everything. Ruth said firmly, "But here's the problem." Ruth pulled the document back and replaced it with another one. This one looked newer. The paper was crisp. 2 months ago. Rose had a medical episode. "Do you remember?" "Yes," I said. "She fell. She needed hip surgery." "Correct," Ruth said. "She was transferred to the hospital. She was placed on heavy pain management, oxycodone, sedatives. She was, for all legal intents and purposes, incapacitated. She could not tell you what day of the week it was, let alone understand a complex legal instrument." Ruth tapped the paper with her index finger. "This power of attorney was signed on the 2nd day of her recovery." I leaned forward. I read the date. It matched the timeline perfectly. "It grants Linda Lawson full durable power of attorney over Rose Whitaker's financial and real estate assets," Ruth said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. "It gives her the power to sell, lease, mortgage, and liquidate," but she was drugged. I said, "Grandma was out of it. I visited her that week. She thought I was her sister from 1950. "Exactly," Ruth said, "which makes this document invalid. It is voidable on the grounds of lack of capacity and undue influence, but, and this is a big but, on the face of it, to a bank or a lender who does not know the medical history. It looks valid. The signature is shaky, but it is there. Linda had it notarized by someone I am guessing is a friend of hers." "A neighbor," I said, recognizing the notary stamp. "Mrs. Higgins? She plays bridge with my mother." "Of course she does," Ruth muttered. "So," Ruth continued, leaning back, "if Linda used this power of attorney to do something, we have a way to attack it. We can prove Rose was not competent. We can get the medical records. We can depose the doctors. but we need to know what she did. I reached into my bag. My hand brushed against the water treatment textbook where the lottery ticket was hidden. But I grabbed my phone instead. I know what she did, I said. I unlocked the phone and opened the gallery. I placed the device on the desk. Swiping to the first photo I had taken in my father's study, Ruth put on a pair of reading glasses. She leaned over the phone. She did not speak for a long time. She swiped. She zoomed in. She swiped again. I watched her face. I saw the moment she saw the interest rate. Her eyebrows twitched. I saw the moment she saw the collateral address. Her jaw tightened. And then, she got to the last photo, the guarantor page. She stared at it for a full minute. Then she looked up at me. She took off her glasses. "Is that your signature?" she asked. "No," I said. "It looks like it. They practiced, but I did not sign it. I was at work. I have the logs." Ruth let out a breath that was almost a laugh, a dark, cynical laugh. "Well," she said, "they got greedy." "What do you mean?" I asked. "If they had just mortgaged the house," Ruth said, "it would be a civil matter. It would be a messy family dispute about whether Grandma was competent. We would fight it in probate court. It would take years. But this?" She pointed at the phone. "Forging a signature on a federal lending document? Identity theft? Bank fraud? This is not a dispute, Jean. This is a felony. This is prison time." She looked at me with a new level of respect. "You taking these photos?" That was smart. Most people would have screamed. Most people would have confronted them right there. By keeping your mouth shut, you preserved the crime scene. I felt a shiver of vindication. "So what do we do?" I asked. "Do we call the police?" Ruth shook her head. "Not yet. If you call the police now, the lender gets spooked. The bridge loan might get called in immediately. The house could get tied up in a foreclosure proceeding while the investigation happens. Lenders do not care about justice. They care about their principal. They might try to seize the property anyway, claiming they were good faith lenders. We need to be surgical." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street. "We have two objectives. Jean, objective 1 is to secure your windfall. We are going to set up a blind trust today. I have the paperwork ready. We will call it the November Trust. I will be the trustee on record. We will claim the lottery prize through the trust. Your name will never appear in the press. The money goes into a secure account that no one in your family can touch or even see." "And objective 2? I asked. "Objective 2 is to save Rose and burn the contract," Ruth said, turning back to me. She walked back to the desk. "Here's the strategy. We need to let them think they got away with it. We need them to feel safe. When people feel safe, they get sloppy, they spend the money, they leave paper trails. The cruise?" I said. "They are going on a cruise in 10 days. "Perfect," Ruth said. "That is our timeline. They are desperate for this vacation. They need it to validate their social standing. They used the loan money to pay for it, didn't they?" "Yes," I said. "And to pay off other debts." Ruth nodded. "Good. That establishes the motive and the usage of funds. Here is what is going to happen. While they are sipping Mai Tais on the deck, we are going to file a petition for emergency guardianship of Rose, citing the fraudulent power of attorney. We will attach the medical records. We will attach the affidavit from you stating that your signature is forged. But if we do that, won't the lender come after me?" I asked, "since I am the guarantor?" Ruth smiled. It was a shark smile. "Let them try. You are going to have $100 million in a trust that they do not know about. But more importantly, once we prove the forgery, the guarantee is void. The loan goes into default. The lender will go after the borrowers, your parents, and your brother-in-law. The broker." She tapped the screen where Derek's name was listed. "This guy," she said, "he is the weak link. A broker taking a commission on a fraudulent loan involving a senior citizen? He will lose his license. He might go to jail. When we apply pressure, he will flip on your parents so fast it will make your head spin." She sat down and pulled a legal pad toward her. "But you have to be calm. Jean, you have to go back to that house. You have to smile. You have to let them believe that you are still the little doormat they can wipe their feet on. If they sense you have power, either the money or the knowledge, they will circle the wagons. They will destroy evidence. They might even try to move Rose to a different facility to hide her. I swallowed hard. The thought of facing them, of listening to Derek's arrogance and my mother's insults, made my stomach turn. I can do it, I said. Ruth looked at me. I know you can. You have been doing it your whole life, but this time is different. This time, you are not taking it because you have to. You are taking it because you are holding the detonator. She opened a drawer and pulled out a thick stack of documents. Now, she said, clicking a pen, let's make you a multimillionaire. We spent the next 2 hours going over the trust documents. I signed my name, my real signature, over and over again. The November Trust. It sounded mysterious. It sounded like a thriller novel. Ruth explained the fee structure. She would take a standard percentage for the estate work, but for the lottery claim, she was charging a flat fee. It was fair. She was honest. As I was packing up to leave, Ruth handed me a business card. It had a cell phone number handwritten on the back. Call me on this line if anything happens. She said, and Jean, yes? Don't spend a dime yet. Not until the money is actually in the trust account. And for God's sake, don't buy a new car. Drive that sedan until the wheels fall off. Appearance is everything. I stood up. I felt different than I had when I walked in. I felt heavier, but also stronger. I have one question. I said, ask, why did Grandma Rose have only $25,000? My grandfather was a successful doctor. They lived in a big house. Where did the rest of it go? Ruth sighed. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Your mother. She said, Linda has been borrowing from Rose for 20 years. A renovation here, a car there, private school tuition for Brielle. Rose gave it to her because she wanted to keep the peace. She wanted to be loved. But about 5 years ago, the money started running out. That is when Rose set up that account for you. She realized she was being drained, and she wanted to save one last seed for the winter. I felt the anger flare up again. My parents hadn't just stolen the house. They had consumed my grandmother's life's work, bite by bite, for decades, and they had called me the failure. I understand. I said. I walked to the door. Jean. Ruth called out. I turned. Greedy people are hasty, she said. They see the money, and their brains turn off. We will use that. We will let them run right off the cliff. All you have to do is stand aside and not catch them. I nodded. I will not catch them. I said, I promise. I walked out of the office and into the bright, blinding sunlight of Savannah. My phone, which I had turned back on, buzzed immediately. It was a text from Brielle. Hey, Mom said you're not answering. We are doing a final fitting for the cruise outfits on Thursday. You should come. Mom said she might buy you a scarf or something. A scarf. I looked at the text. I looked at the quick stop across the street where a news van was setting up a camera. Interviewing the clerk about the mystery winner, I typed back, sounds great. I'd love to come. I hit send. The trap was set, and I was the bait. On Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message that surprised me more than the lottery notification had. It was from Aunt Tessa. Meet me at the Roasted Bean on Bull Street, 4 p.m., alone, please. Tessa never texted me directly. In the family communications hierarchy, information flowed from the top, my parents, down to the lieutenants, Brielle and Derek, and finally trickled down to the foot soldiers like Tessa and me. For her to bypass the chain of command meant the structure was fracturing. I left work early. I told my boss I had a dental appointment, a lie that came easily now that I was living a double life. The Roasted Bean was a small, cluttered coffee shop that smelled of burnt beans and damp raincoats. It was not the kind of place my sister would ever set foot in. The lighting was too harsh for selfies, and the milk was not organic. I spotted Tessa in a booth at the back, huddled over a steaming mug as if it were the only source of warmth in the world. When I sat down opposite her, I was shocked. It had only been a few weeks since Thanksgiving, but Tessa looked like she had aged a decade. The perfectly coiffed hair she usually sported was pulled back in a messy bun, revealing gray roots she would normally have dyed immediately. Her skin was sallow, and there were dark, heavy bags under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. She looked like a woman who was carrying a weight that was slowly crushing her spine. "Jean," she said, her voice jumpy. "You came." "Of course I came," I said. I signaled the waitress and ordered a black coffee. "Is everything okay, Aunt Tessa?" She laughed. A brittle, cracking sound. "Okay?" "No, nothing is okay." She looked around the shop, checking the nearby tables. A group of college students was arguing about philosophy in the corner, and an old man was reading a newspaper by the window. We were safe. I cannot go on that cruise. "Jean," she whispered. I frowned. "Why not?" "I thought you paid the deposit." "I did," she said. "I put $2,000 on my credit card. Money I do not have. But that is not why. I cannot go because I cannot stomach sitting at a table with that man for 14 days and pretending he is not a monster." "Derek?" I asked. She nodded. Her hands were shaking so bad the coffee in her mug rippled. "Jean, you work in contracts," she said. "You are smart. You have always been the smart one. Even if Gordon and Linda treat you like you are slow, you know what Derek actually does, right? He is a wealth manager." I said, playing dumb. "He runs Harlan Wealth Management." "He is a predator," Tessa spat. The venom in her voice was startling. "He does not manage wealth. He finds desperate people, small business owners, retirees, people with assets but no cash flow, and he hooks them into high-interest short-term loans. He calls them bridge capital. I call them traps." I felt a chill. She was describing exactly what I had found in my father's study. He gets them to sign over collateral worth 3 times the loan value. Tessa continued, "And then he buries them in fees. Origination fees, consulting fees, early repayment penalties, late repayment penalties. He engineers the default. Jean, he wants them to fail so he can seize the assets." I leaned in. "How do you know this?" "Tessa?" "Because he tried to do it to me," she admitted. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Last year, when I had that trouble with my roof, he offered to help. He brought over papers. Thank God I showed them to a friend of mine who works at a bank. She told me if I signed that, I would lose my house in 6 months. She wiped her eyes with a paper napkin. "I confronted your father about it." She said, "I told Gordon that Derek was dangerous." "What did Dad say?" I asked. Tessa looked down at the table. "He told me I was being ungrateful. He said Derek was family and he was just trying to be savvy. But I saw them. Jean, a week later, I was at the house, and I heard them in the study. Gordon and Derek. They were yelling. What were they saying? Gordon was shouting that the interest was eating him alive. He said, 'I cannot keep robbing Peter to pay Paul.' And Derek?" Tessa shivered. "Derek laughed at him. He said, 'You are not robbing Peter. Gordon, you are robbing your mother. And if you want to keep playing the big man in front of your country club friends, you will sign the extension.'" I gripped the edge of the table. So my father knew. He was not just a duped victim. He was a cornered animal who had agreed to bite his own mother to save himself. "Dad is scared of him," I said softly. "He is terrified." Tessa confirmed. "It is not just the money. Derek has something on him. I do not know what it is. But Gordon looks at that boy like he is the devil holding a leash." She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out her phone. The screen was cracked. "But that is not the worst part," she said. She unlocked the phone and opened the photo gallery. She pushed the device across the table to me. I picked it up. It was a photo of another phone screen, likely Derek's. The angle was hasty, slightly blurry, as if taken in secret while the phone was left unattended on a table. It was a text message thread. The contact name at the top was not a name. It was just an emoji of a blue diamond. I read the messages. Sender, diamond. "When are you telling her? I am tired of waiting in the condo." Derek. "Patience, babe. We need the closing to go through. The old lady's house is the golden goose. Once the loan funds, I strip the fees. We clear about 40,000 cash, and I file the separation papers. Sender, diamond. And the sister? The one with the hair? Derek. Brielle is clueless. She thinks we are going on a second honeymoon on the boat. Let her have her Titanic moment. By the time we dock, I will be gone. I stared at the screen. My stomach turned over. Who is this? I asked. Her name is Mallory, Tessa said. She was his assistant 2 years ago. I saw them at a restaurant in Charleston when I was visiting friends. Derek did not see me. They were intimate. So he is stealing Grandma's house, framing me for the debt, and planning to dump Brielle the moment the check clears? I summarized. Tessa nodded. I looked at the date on the text messages. 2 days ago. Does Brielle know? I asked. Tessa let out a long sigh. That is the question, isn't it? Brielle is not stupid. Jean. She just plays a character on TV. I think she knows something is wrong. She knows the money is tight. She knows Derek is cold to her when no one is watching. But Brielle's greatest fear isn't being broke. It is being embarrassed. She would rather stay on a sinking ship and pretend it is a submarine than admit she married a con man. She is not the mastermind, Tessa added. But she is not innocent. She is willfully blind. She sees the new car, the clothes, the trips, and she refuses to ask where the money comes from because she likes the answer, it just appeared, better than the truth. I handed the phone back to Tessa. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Tessa looked me in the eye. Because of what happened at Thanksgiving. She said, the way they treated you, giving you that ticket while they gave her the world, and then dragging Mom away when she tried to defend you. It broke something in me. Jean. I have spent my whole life keeping my mouth shut to keep the peace in this family. And look where it got us. Mom is drugged in a home. Gordon is a criminal. And I am an accomplice by silence. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her fingers were cold. I want to help you. Jean, I do not know what you can do. Maybe nothing. But if you need someone to say that what they are doing is wrong, I will say it. I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. But I also saw a flicker of defiance. She was offering me the one thing I needed to close the loop with Ruth Calder. Tessa, I said slowly, I need you to answer a question honestly. Do you remember when Grandma Rose was in the hospital? The dates? Yes, she said. It was late September. I visited her every day. And do you remember seeing my mother there? With papers? Tessa's face darkened. Yes, I walked in on them. Rose was barely awake. She was on that morphine drip. Linda was holding a pen in Rose's hand, guiding it on the paper. When I asked what she was doing, Linda told me it was just medical insurance forms. She told me to get out. I need you to testify to that. I said, not now, but soon. I need you to write down exactly what you saw. The dates, the condition Grandma was in, and what Linda said. Can you do that? Tessa pulled her hand back. She looked scared. Testify? To who? The police? To a lawyer? I said, a lawyer who is going to make sure Grandma's house doesn't get stolen. Tessa stared at her coffee cup. She was weighing the cost. If she did this, she was exiled. She would be cut off from Gordon, from Linda, from the only family structure she had ever known, toxic as it was. Finally, she looked up. They will hate me, she whispered. They already despise us. Tessa, I said, they just tolerate us because we are useful. You are useful because you are an audience. I am useful because I am a scapegoat. Once they take the house, do you think they will keep you around? She flinched. The truth hit her like a slap. Okay, she said. Her voice was barely audible. Okay, I will do it. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. She ripped out a page and wrote down a series of dates and times. I kept a journal. She said, when Mom was sick, I wrote everything down because I was worried the doctors were messing up her meds. It is all in there. Linda came on the 24th and the 25th, both days. Mom was hallucinating. She pushed the paper toward me. I took it. It was the final nail in the coffin. With this, Ruth Calder could prove the power of attorney was void ab initio, void from the start. I looked at the text message photo on her phone one last time. Can you send me that screenshot? I asked. Tessa nodded. She tapped the screen. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Done. We sat in silence for a moment. The coffee shop was filling up with the late afternoon crowd, people laughing, complaining about work, living normal lives where their parents weren't committing felonies against them. Jean, Tessa said, standing up to leave. She pulled her coat tight around her thin frame. Yeah? Be careful. Derek is desperate. I have seen him when he thinks he is losing. He gets nasty. Do not let them paint you as the villain just because you are the one holding the mirror. I will be careful, I said. She walked out into the rain. I watched her go. She looked frail, but she walked a little straighter than she had when she came in. I sat there for another 20 minutes. I finished my black coffee. It was cold and bitter. I opened my banking app on my phone. I looked at my checking account. Balance, $3,412. Then I closed my eyes and visualized the other number. The number that was currently existing in a limbo state, waiting for the November trust to claim it. $100 million. And now, I had the leverage. I had the timeline. I had the witness. I had the motive. Derek's affair. I had the proof of the crime. Ruth Calder had told me to let them run off the cliff. But after seeing those texts, after seeing Derek call my sister clueless and my grandmother the golden goose, I realized that just letting them fall wasn't enough. I needed to make sure they jumped. I needed to create a situation where they felt so confident, so untouchable, that they would expose themselves completely. I needed the family theater to have one final spectacular performance. I picked up my phone and texted Ruth, I have the witness, and I have proof of intent to defraud. We are ready. Then I texted my mother. Hi, Mom. I would love to come to the fitting on Thursday, and maybe we can do dinner after? I have been thinking. I should spend more time with the family before you all go. The reply came in 30 seconds. That sounds lovely. Jean, glad you're finally coming to your senses. We will see you at 5. I stood up and put on my coat. I was not going to ask for justice. Justice is something you beg for. I was going to build a trap made of their own greed, lined with their own lies, and I was going to place myself right in the center of it, smiling, waiting for the moment the steel jaws snapped shut. I drove home in the rain. I did not listen to music. I listened to the sound of the tires on the wet pavement. It sounded like applause. The drive to the Oak Bridge Care Center was a blur of gray highway and leafless trees. I arrived just as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long skeletal shadows across the parking lot. The facility was nice enough on the brochure: manicured lawns, a fountain that was currently turned off for the winter, and a brick facade that screamed respectable, but inside. It smelled the way all these places smell. It was a cocktail of industrial-strength lemon floor cleaner, boiled vegetables, and the faint, underlying copper scent of decay. I walked down the long corridor to room 312. A cart full of dinner trays rattled past me, pushed by a nurse who looked too tired to smile. I passed open doors where televisions blared game shows to empty rooms, the canned laughter echoing off the linoleum. I reached Grandma Rose's door. It was closed. I knocked softly, waited a beat, and pushed it open. The room was dim. The blinds were drawn, slicing the fading daylight into thin strips. On the bedside table, a vase of carnations, probably sent by my mother a week ago, had begun to droop, their petals browning at the edges. The water in the vase was cloudy. It made my chest tighten. It was such a perfect metaphor for how my family treated people. They bought the flowers to look good, but they never bothered to change the water. Grandma Rose was lying in the bed, propped up by 3 pillows. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if the bed was slowly swallowing her whole. Her skin was like parchment, thin and translucent, mapping the blue veins beneath. Her eyes were closed. I stepped closer, trying to be quiet. But the floorboard creaked. Her eyes snapped open. For a second, there was confusion. Then, the haze cleared, and I saw the sharp, intelligent woman who had taught me how to play chess when I was 6, Jean. She rasped. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping together. "Hi, Grandma," I said. I pulled the plastic chair closer to the bed. "I brought you some fresh socks. The wool ones you like." She waved her hand dismissively. A gesture that required visible effort. She did not care about socks. She stared at me, her gaze drilling into my forehead. "Did you call Ruth?" she asked. It was the first thing she said. "No hello. No how are you. Just the mission." I nodded. I leaned in close, lowering my voice even though we were alone. "I called her. I met with her. We are handling it." Rose let out a long breath, her shoulders sagging into the pillows. It was the exhale of a sentry who has finally been relieved of her post. "Good," she whispered. "Good. She is a shark. That woman. But she is our shark." I took her hand. It felt cold and fragile, like holding a small bird. "Grandma," I said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not get upset. Okay?" She looked at me, a wry smile twitching at the corner of her mouth. "I am 82 years old, and I am living in a room that smells like bleach. I think I am past getting upset. Tell me." I took a breath. "I found the papers," I said, "in Dad's office. They took out a loan. A big one. $250,000. I watched her face. She did not blink, and she prompted. "And they used your house in Hilton Head as collateral." I said. Rose closed her eyes. She did not gasp. She did not cry. She just nodded slowly, a rhythmic, sorrowful motion. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew they would come for the house eventually. It is the last thing left to eat. There is more," I said. My voice trembled. "They forged my signature. Grandma, they made me the guarantor. If they don't pay, and they won't, the bank takes your house. And then they come for me." Rose's eyes opened. This time, there was fire in them. Real, hot anger. "They used you?" she hissed. "Yes." She gripped my hand. Her strength was surprising. "I remember," she said. Her voice was low, distant, as if she were looking at a scene playing out on the ceiling. "It was weeks ago. I was in the hospital. The pain was bad. Jean, it felt like someone was grinding glass in my hip. The doctors gave me something heavy. I was floating." She swallowed, her throat clicking dryly. Linda came in. She continued. "She was wearing that red coat, the one she thinks makes her look powerful. She was smiling. She had papers. She told me. It was just insurance forms. Formalities," she said. "Sign here, Mom, so we can get you better pain meds. Sign here so we can take care of you." Rose looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. I just wanted the pain to stop. Jean, I would have signed a deal with the devil if it meant the hurting stopped. My head was full of fog. I could not read the words. The letters were swimming, so I signed. She turned her face away, looking toward the window. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I let them in." "No," I said fiercely. I squeezed her hand. "You did not let them in. They broke in. They drugged you, and they lied to you. That is not your fault. That is a crime." Rose remained silent for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the heater in the corner. Then I decided to play my ace. I needed her to know that we were not just fighting. We were going to win. "Grandma," I said, "look at me." She turned back. "I have one more thing to tell you," I said, "and this one is a secret, a real secret." I leaned fast until my lips were inches from her ear. "That lottery ticket they gave me at Thanksgiving? The $2 joke?" I felt her tense up. "I won." I whispered, "I won the jackpot. $100 million. I pulled back to look at her face. I expected shock. I expected joy. I expected her to ask if I was kidding. Instead, Rose stared at me for a solid 5 seconds, and then she started to laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was a dry, rasping chuckle that shook her frail chest. It was the sound of someone appreciating a cosmic absurdity. 100 million. She wheezed. "Yes," I said. And they gave it to you? She asked. To mock you? Yes. She laughed again, shaking her head against the pillow. God has a twisted sense of humor, she said. He really does. They hand you the sword to cut their own throats, and they think it is a joke. She looked at me, and her expression sobered. She reached up and touched my cheek. Her fingers were rough. Listen to me, Jean, she said. Her voice was stern now. I am listening. Money does not save you, she said. Do not think for 1 second that the money is the victory. Your grandfather had money. Look what it did to your mother. It made her hollow. It made her hungry for things that do not matter. Money is just a tool. It is a hammer. You can build a house with it, or you can crush your own thumb. The truth, she said, tapping my cheek. The truth is what saves you. The money just buys you the microphone to speak it. I nodded. I understand. She shifted in the bed, grimacing slightly with the movement. Open the top drawer, she commanded. I opened the drawer of the bedside table. It was filled with the mundane debris of care home life. Lip balm, a hairbrush, a stack of crossword puzzles. Reaching to the back, she said, under the lining paper, I felt around. My fingers brushed against something hard and small. I pulled it out. It was a small, velvet jewelry box, old and worn. The blue velvet rubbed bald in patches. Open it, she said. I snapped the lid open. Inside, there was no jewelry. There was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, and a small, modern sticky note. That paper, Rose said, is a letter I wrote 10 years ago. When your grandfather died, it outlines exactly what I wanted for the house. I wanted it to go to a trust, for you, and for any grandchildren Brielle might have, though God help them. I unfolded the paper. It was handwritten, in Rose's elegant, looping script. It was not a legal will, but it was a clear declaration of intent. I, Rose Whitaker, being of sound mind, wish for my property at Hilton Head to be preserved as a sanctuary for my family, specifically my granddaughter Jean. And the note? I asked, pointing to the sticky paper. Rose smiled grimly. That is the combination to the wall safe in the house in Hilton Head, the one behind the painting in the study. Linda does not know it exists. Inside that safe is the original deed, and the original copy of my will before Linda made me change lawyers 3 times. She looked at me with an intensity that made me shiver. If they try to say I was confused, if they try to say I wanted them to have the house, you open that safe. You show them that I've been trying to protect that house from them for a decade. I closed the box and gripped it tight. This was the emotional smoking gun. It proved that the power of attorney was not a change of heart. It was a violation of a lifetime of intent. I will keep it safe. I promised. Rose closed her eyes again. She looked exhausted. The burst of energy was fading. Jean, she murmured. Yes. Grandma? Get me out of here, she said. Her voice was so quiet I almost missed it. Please, I do not want to die in a room that smells like this. I felt a tear hot on my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. I promise, I said. I swear to you, I am going to buy the house back. I am going to hire the best nurses in the state. I'm going to bring you home. You are going to sit on the porch and smell the ocean. Not this floor cleaner. And the garden? She asked. Her eyes still closed. I will fix the garden, I said. I will plant hydrangeas and roses, hundreds of them. She smiled, a genuine, soft smile. That sounds nice, she whispered. I sat with her until her breathing leveled out into sleep. I watched the rise and fall of her chest, frail but stubborn. She was the only person in this family who had ever really seen me. They looked at me and saw a utility. She looked at me and saw a person. I stood up quietly. I put the velvet box in my purse, right next to the phone that held the evidence of their crimes. I walked out of the room. I walked past the nurse's station. I walked out the automatic doors into the parking lot. The air outside was cold and biting, but it felt clean. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs until they burned. I looked back at the building, a brick box where families deposited the inconveniences they did not want to deal with. My parents and Derek and Brielle were probably at dinner right now, discussing their cruise outfits, laughing about the stupid sister who worked in a cubicle. They thought they were the main characters. They thought the world was arranged for their benefit. But as I unlocked my car door, I realized something. This was not a war about money. I had the money. I had already won that game. This was a war about definition. For 34 years, they had defined me. Jean the quiet one, Jean the independent one, Jean the failure, Jean the doormat. And they had defined themselves, the successful ones, the deserving ones. Grandma Rose was right. The money was just a hammer. I got into the driver's seat and started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness. It was time to swing the hammer. It was time to show them who was actually the human being in the Lawson family, and who was just a parasite in a nice suit. I put the car in gear. I had a dinner to attend tomorrow. I had a role to play. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what my lines were. The night before the Lawson clan set sail on their voyage of stolen luxury, they decided to host a farewell dinner. It was branded as a celebration, a final gathering of the tribe before they conquered the Mediterranean. But in true Lawson fashion, it was really just a logistical offloading exercise. They invited me not because they wanted my company, but because they needed a project manager. Jean, be a dear and handle the reservation. My mother had told me over the phone 2 days prior, we want that Italian place on the river, the one with the white tablecloths, and make sure we get the private alcove. You know how your father hates the noise of the common riffraff? Oh, and pre-order the appetizers, calamari and the burrata. You know what we like. So, there I was. Thursday night, 7 o'clock. I was wearing a sensible navy dress that allowed me to fade into the background, standing at the head of the table at Rizzi's. Directing the waiters like a traffic controller, I checked the wine list. I adjusted the seating arrangement so that Derek would not have the sun in his eyes. I made sure my father's scotch was waiting for him the moment he sat down. I did it all with a smile. It was the best performance of my life. Inside, my heart was a cold, hard stone, weighed down by the secrets I was carrying. I knew that the suit Derek was wearing was likely paid for with the origination fee from the fraudulent loan. I knew that the celebration was funded by mortgaging an 82-year-old woman's peace of mind. But on the outside, I was Jean the dutiful, Jean the doormat. Jean, who was just so happy to be included, even if only as staff. They arrived 20 minutes late, sweeping into the restaurant with the air of minor celebrities. Brielle was glowing, talking loudly about the excursions they had booked. My mother was critiquing the lighting. My father was already looking for the waiter to demand attention. Excellent job. Jean, my father said, sitting down and taking a sip of his scotch without looking at me. At least you can handle a dinner reservation. It is good to see you applying yourself. Thank you, Dad, I said. I took my seat at the far end of the table. The dinner was a masterclass in narcissism. For 2 hours, I listened to them construct a reality that did not exist. They talked about the market as if they understood it. They talked about legacy as if they were building one rather than selling it off. Derek was in high spirits. He was drinking an expensive Barolo. His face flushed. He kept checking his phone under the table, texting Mallory, no doubt, counting down the hours until he could ditch my sister and vanish with the cash. So, Jean, Derek said, leaning back and picking his teeth with a cocktail stick. What are you going to do while we are living La Dolce Vita? Going to scratch off a few more tickets? The table chuckled. It was the mandated response to Derek's wit. I took a slow sip of my water. I placed the glass down with deliberate precision. I have some projects, I said. Home improvements. Home improvements? Brielle laughed. On your condo? Jean, you rent? Why would you improve a place you do not own? It was a rich comment coming from a woman whose husband had just mortgaged a house he did not own. Actually, I said, keeping my voice light, almost airy, I am thinking about gardening, getting back to roots. Derek snorted. Well, keep dreaming. Jean, maybe lightning will strike and you will win $10 next time. You know what they say. Hope is the strategy of the poor. He looked at me, expecting me to flinch, expecting me to look down at my plate in shame. I looked him dead in the eye. I let the smile drop from my face for just a fraction of a second, enough for him to see something dark underneath. "You know, Derek," I said softly, "I read somewhere that luck is funny. It usually arrives exactly when people are too sure they control everything. It likes to surprise the confident ones." The table went quiet for a beat. Derek frowned. He looked at me, really looked at me, trying to decipher if I had just insulted him, but I was already smiling again, reaching for the bread basket. "Pass the butter, please?" I asked. The moment passed. They went back to talking about themselves. They did not smell the smoke. They did not see that I was not eating dinner with them. I was presiding over their last meal as free citizens. While they argued about whether to tip 20% or 15%, my mind was across town, visualizing the paperwork on Ruth Calder's desk. We had timed it perfectly. Ruth and I had decided that filing the lawsuit while they were still in Savannah was too risky. If they got served with papers tonight, they would cancel the trip. They would lawyer up. They would start destroying evidence. They would harass Grandma Rose. No, we needed them gone. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. The moment their cruise ship crossed the maritime boundary and disconnected from the local cell towers, Ruth would walk into the courthouse. She would file the emergency petition for guardianship of Rose Whitaker. She would file the civil complaint regarding the fraudulent deed of trust. And she would file a lis pendens, a formal notice of pending legal action, against the property in Hilton Head. That notice would freeze the asset. It meant that even if the lender tried to foreclose, they could not sell the house with a clouded title. It stopped the bleeding. Simultaneously, I was handling my own defense. I had spent the last 2 days gathering every scrap of paper that proved I was Jean Lawson, the boring analyst. Not Jean Lawson, the high-stakes guarantor. I had my employee keycard logs showing I was in a secure building at the exact minute the forgery took place. I had my credit reports frozen. I had an affidavit notarized by a clerk at my office, who did not know the details, just that I was swearing to my signature, stating that I had not signed any loan documents in the last 12 months. I was building a firewall. By the time they docked in their first port of call in Italy, their financial house would not just be burning, it would be ashes, and they would be 4,000 miles away, unable to do anything but scream into the ocean. The dinner ended. My father let me pay the tip. "Take care of things, Jean," my mother said, kissing the air next to my cheek. "Don't do anything crazy." I watched them get into their cars. Derek's SUV, my parents' sedan. They drove off, taillights fading into the night. "Bon voyage," I whispered. The next morning, Friday, was departure day. I went to work as usual. I needed the alibi of normalcy. I sat at my desk, reviewing a contract for a sewage treatment plant. But my phone was propped up against my monitor. At 10 o'clock, they would be boarding. At 11 o'clock, the ship would push off. At 10:30, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Brielle. "Jean, are you there?" I waited 2 minutes. I took a sip of coffee. Then I typed back, "Hey, what's up? Thought you were boarding." Her reply came instantly. The typing bubble danced frantically. "We are at the duty-free shop. My card just got declined. It is so embarrassing. Derek is in the bathroom and Dad is already on the gangway. Can you Venmo me $500? Just until I get signal again? The bank must have frozen it because of the travel notice. Please." I stared at the screen. Her card was declined. Of course it was. They were maxed out. They were running on fumes, using credit to pay credit. And the algorithm had finally caught up with one of her cards. $500. In the past, Jean the doormat would have panicked. I would have transferred the money instantly, terrified that my sister would be uncomfortable for 5 minutes. I would have eaten ramen for a month to cover it. But today I had a net worth that I could not even fully comprehend yet. I could buy the duty-free shop, I could buy the ship, but I was not going to buy her a safety net. I typed my response slowly, savoring every letter. "Oh no, that is weird. I actually don't have that much liquid cash right now. Bills just hit. You should ask Derek. He is the finance guy, right? He is good with money. He will sort it out. I hit send. I watch the screen. Read at 10:34 a.m. Then, the three dots appeared. They pulsed. 1, 2, 3, then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. Then they vanished for good. She did not reply. I could picture it. The confusion. The sting of rejection from the sister who never said no. The sudden creeping realization that Derek was taking a long time in the bathroom and her card was dead plastic. I put the phone down. The tower of cards was shaking. At noon, I left the office for lunch. I did not go to a sandwich shop. I drove to the historic district. I drove to Grandma Rose's house. It was a beautiful old Victorian structure, neglected but dignified. The grass was overgrown. The paint was peeling on the shutters. It looked sad. I did not go in. I stood on the sidewalk, looking at the gate. I took my phone out. I snapped a picture of the house, framing it so the overgrown ivy looked artistic rather than messy. I opened Instagram. I never posted on Instagram. My profile was a graveyard of blurry food pics from 3 years ago. I uploaded the photo to my story. I added a caption. Just 4 words. Renovation project starts now. I hit post. It was a lie. Technically, I had not started the renovation, but it was a truth in spirit. I was reclaiming the territory. I knew who would see it. My cousins followed me. My mother followed me. Even if she never liked my posts, Brielle followed me. If they had bought the Wi-Fi package on the ship, and I knew they had, because they could not exist without an audience, they would see it, and they would wonder, why is Jean at the house? Why does she say renovation? Where did she get the money? Does she know? It was a psychological depth charge. I dropped it into the water and waited for the pressure to build. By 2 o'clock, the reaction began. It did not start with my family. It started with the news. My phone started blowing up with notifications from the local news apps. Mystery winner. Update. Lottery officials confirm the winner has contacted a legal representative. Rumor mill. Was the ticket bought by a local SCAD student? Or a tourist? The group chat. The Lawson family circle. Ignited. Cousin Mike. Did you guys see the news? The lawyers from Savannah. That money is staying in town. Aunt Becky. Imagine having $100 million. I would buy a private island. Uncle Ted. I bet it is some retiree who will leave it to a cat. That is how it always goes. I watched the messages scroll by. I did not participate. Then, a direct message from my mother popped up. Jean. Just my name. Jean. Are you at Mom's house? I saw your picture. I did not answer. 2 minutes later, why are you renovating? We did not discuss this. That house is complicated right now. You should not be touching anything. She was nervous. The word complicated was doing a lot of heavy lifting. She was terrified I would find a foreclosure notice stuck to the door or a surveyor from the bank. I let her wait. I let her stare at her phone screen in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, her gin and tonic sweating in her hand, wondering why her obedient daughter had suddenly gone rogue. Then, another message from her. And all this talk about the lottery, it is so silly. I hope you threw that ticket away. It would be just like you to keep trash. She was fishing. She was desperate. She was trying to frame the narrative before it could form. It is trash. You threw it away. Tell me you threw it away. I finally typed back. I am just cleaning up. Mom, there was a lot of trash, but you know me. Sometimes I find things people dropped by mistake. I sent it. It was ambiguous. It was innocent. But to a guilty conscience, it was a threat. I could imagine her face, the tightening of the jaw, the look she would shoot my father, the sudden inability to enjoy the sea breeze. I turned off my phone. The calm was over. The ship had sailed. The trap was armed, and I was going to enjoy my weekend. I had a meeting with a landscape architect on Saturday to discuss hydrangeas, hundreds of them. I waited until exactly 7:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday night before I sent the message. I was sitting in my home office, a room that was actually just a converted corner of my living room, but tonight it felt like a command center. I had my laptop open. I had 3 specific PDF files queued up on my desktop, labeled simply as Exhibit A, Exhibit B, and Exhibit C. I had a glass of water, no ice. I needed my voice to be clear. I opened the Lawson Family Circle group chat. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight. Video call. Everyone must be there. I have news. I hit send. The reaction was Pavlovian. Usually, if I asked for a call, I would get excuses about work, or yoga, or bad signal. But the seeds I had planted, the renovation photo, the rumors on the news, my cryptic text to my mother about cleaning up, had done their work. They were hungry. They were terrified. They were hoping for a miracle and dreading a disaster all at the same time. We are in the lounge. My mother replied within 10 seconds. We will be ready. Is this about the ticket? Derek asked. I did not reply. I just watched the clock on my screen tick down. 7:58, 7:59, 8 o'clock. I initiated the call. The screen went black for a moment, buffering, and then pixelated into color. The image resolved. It was almost comically perfect. They were sitting on a plush cream-colored sofa in what looked like the ship's exclusive VIP lounge. Behind them, through a floor-to-ceiling glass window, was a stunning tropical sunset, purples and oranges bleeding into a dark ocean. It was the kind of backdrop influencers kill for. My mother was in the center, holding a martini. My father was next to her, looking stiff and anxious. Brielle was on the other side, looking sun-kissed and oblivious. Derek was leaning over the back of the sofa, posing like he was on the cover of a business magazine. "Jean!" my mother cried out. The delay made her voice sync weirdly with her lips. "We are here. The connection is a bit spotty, so make it quick. What is going on?" I looked at them. I looked at their tans, their expensive linen clothes, the effortless entitlement radiating from them even through a digital feed. I took a breath. I wanted to confirm the rumors. I said, my voice was steady. It did not shake. "The rumors?" Derek asked, his eyes narrowing. "You mean the lottery thing?" "Jean, do not tell me you actually won $5. I leaned into the camera. I did not win $5. Derek, I matched all 6 numbers. The ticket is verified. I won $100 million. The silence that followed was absolute. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. It was as if the video feed had frozen. Then, chaos. "Oh my God!" Brielle shrieked, clapping her hands over her mouth. "Jean!" my mother screamed, dropping her martini glass. It shattered on the table. But she did not even look at it. I knew it. "I told your father. I told him. Jean is a lucky girl." My father's face went from gray to a flushed, deep red. He leaned forward, practically climbing into the camera lens. $100 million? He gasped. "Jean, honey, is this real? You are not joking?" "It is real. Dad," I said. The dynamic shifted so fast it gave me whiplash. The disdain, the mockery, the independent labels. They evaporated instantly. In their place was a sugary, desperate warmth. "We need to celebrate," Brielle yelled. "You have to fly out. Meet us in Naples. We will upgrade you to the suite next to ours." But Derek was the loudest. He pushed his way to the front of the frame, shoving Brielle slightly aside. He was in full predator mode. His eyes were wide, his pupils dilated. "Okay, Jean, listen to me," he said, his voice dropping to that serious, "I am the expert tone. This is serious money. You cannot just leave it in a bank account. You have tax liabilities. You have inflation risk. We need to structure this immediately." He was talking fast, using his hands to chop the air. "I can set up a diversified portfolio by tomorrow morning." Derek continued, "We will put 30% in high-yield bonds, 40% in equities, and I have some private placement opportunities that are invitation only. I will waive my initial consult fee, obviously, because we are family, but we need to move the principal before the IRS flags it." He was already spending it. He was already calculating his commission. He looked at me not as a sister-in-law, but as a whale to be harpooned. "Jean, honey," my mother chimed in, breathless. We need to discuss the house, the one in Hilton Head. You know it needs so much work. With this money, we could tear it down and build something magnificent, a family estate. I let them talk for another 10 seconds. I let them build their castles in the air. I let them salivate. Then, I cut the line. I agree. Derek, I said, raising my voice slightly, we do need to look at the paperwork. In fact, I have been looking at some paperwork all week. I think we should review it together. Excellent, Derek said, nodding vigorously. Smart girl, what do you have? A trust draft? Not exactly. I said, let me share my screen. I clicked the share screen button. I selected the window displaying Exhibit A. The beautiful sunset on their end was replaced by a high-resolution scan of a document. It was the bridge loan agreement from Apex Capital Solutions. I zoomed in. I made sure the loan amount, $250,000, was front and center. What is this? Brielle asked, squinting at the screen. Jean, what are you showing us? Derek went still. His mouth, which had been open to pontificate about tax shelters, slowly closed. My father made a noise. It was a strangled, choking sound. This is the loan Dad took out 3 weeks ago. I said calmly, $250,000 at 24% interest. My mother's smile froze. She looked at my father, then at the screen, then at the camera. Jean, she said, her voice turning sharp. Why do you have that? That is private business. Stop sharing. I scrolled down. I scrolled past the interest rate. I scrolled past the late fees. I landed on the collateral page. 42 Ocean View Drive, Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. And this, I narrated, like a teacher explaining a simple concept to a slow class, is the house you pledged, Grandma Rose's house, the house you do not own. Jean, my father shouted, stop this right now. You do not understand how business works. Oh, I understand business. Dad, I interrupted. I analyze contracts for a living. Remember? The job you all think is so boring? Well, it taught me how to spot a fraud. I scrolled to the final page. I zoomed in on the signature line. Guarantor. Jean Lawson. And this, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the static, is my favorite part. This is my name, my social security number, and a signature that looks a lot like mine, but isn't mine. I looked at the camera. My father looked like he was having a cardiac event. Derek looked like a trapped rat, his eyes darting side to side. You forged my signature, I said. You stole my identity to secure a predatory loan because you were broke and you needed to pay for the vacation you are currently enjoying. My mother tried to pivot. It was a clumsy, desperate maneuver. Jean, stop being dramatic, she snapped. We did it for the family. We were going to pay it back. We just needed a bridge. Your father was expecting a bonus. We used your name because we knew you would want to help. It is just a formality. A formality? I asked. A felony is not a formality. Mom, identity theft is not a formality. Derek finally spoke up. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a squeak. Jean, look, let's not use big words like felony. We can fix this, with your lottery winnings. You can pay off this loan tomorrow. It is pocket change for you now. We pay it off. Nobody gets hurt, and we all move on. I can even negotiate the prepayment penalty for you. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted me to use my money to pay off the debt he had tricked my father into, earning him a commission on both ends. I am not paying off anything. Derek, I said, and I am not done sharing. I closed Exhibit A. I opened Exhibit B. The screen changed. It was now a timeline. On the left, medical records showing Rose Whitaker's admission to the hospital, her surgery time, and the dosage of oxycodone she was administered. On the right, the power of attorney document, signed and notarized during the window of her peak sedation. And here we have the theft of the house. I said. My mother went pale. How did you get those? She hissed. Those are medical records. That is a violation of HIPAA. And below that, I continued, ignoring her, is a statement from a witness. Someone who was in the room. Someone who saw you put the pen in Grandma's hand while she was high on narcotics. I highlighted the text. Witness statement. Tessa Lawson. I, Tessa Lawson. Attest that on September 24th, I witnessed Linda Lawson coerce Rose Whitaker. Tessa? My father whispered. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. Tessa talked to you? She did more than talk. I said, she provided an affidavit. She is done keeping your secrets. Dad. My mother stood up. She was trembling with rage. That ungrateful little... After everything we have done for her, she is lying. She is jealous. She is telling the truth, I said, and Ruth Calder agrees. The name dropped like a bomb. My mother stopped shouting. She knew that name. She knew exactly what it meant. You talked to Ruth? She stammered. I did. I said, but wait, there is one last thing. I looked at Brielle. She had been silent this whole time, looking back and forth between the screen and her husband like she was watching a tennis match played with live grenades. This one is for you. Brielle, I said gently. I opened Exhibit C. It was the screenshot of the text messages between Derek and Mallory, the blue diamond emoji, the plan to strip the fees, the plan to leave. Derek. Brielle is clueless. She thinks we are going on a second honeymoon. By the time we dock, I will be gone. I watched Brielle read it. I saw her lips move as she sounded out the words. I saw the color drain from her face until she looked like a wax doll. She turned to Derek. She did not scream. She just looked at him with a look of total, devastating confusion. Derek? She whispered. Who is Mallory? Derek panicked. He tried to grab the tablet they were using for the call. That is fake, he shouted. Jean faked it. She is using AI. She is trying to ruin us because she is jealous. Brielle, baby, look at me. But Brielle did not look at him. She looked at the screen. She looked at the timestamp. You were texting her in the taxi, she said. Her voice broke. When you told me you were checking the stock market, you were texting her. Jean, my father roared. Turn it off. You are destroying this family. No. Dad, I said, I am not destroying it. I am just turning on the lights. You destroyed it when you decided I was worth less than a signature on a loan application. I stopped sharing the screen. My face returned to their view. I looked calm. I felt calm. Here's the situation. I said, I have filed a police report regarding the identity theft. Ruth Calder has filed an emergency petition to revoke the power of attorney and place Grandma Rose under court-ordered guardianship. We have also filed a lis pendens on the Hilton Head house. My mother collapsed onto the sofa. She put her head in her hands. You put us in jail? She sobbed. Your own parents? I am not putting you in jail. I said, the district attorney will decide that. But here's the good news. Since I proved the guarantee was forged, the bank cannot come after me. And since we blocked the sale of the house, they cannot take Grandma's property. I looked at Derek. So that means the loan is in default. Derek, and since the collateral is frozen and the guarantor is void, the lender is going to come for the borrower. And the broker. Derek was sweating. Visible beads of sweat on his forehead. Jean, wait, he pleaded. We can work this out. 100 million. We can make all this go away. No, I said, we can't. I looked at Brielle. She was crying silently, tears ruining her perfect makeup. Brielle, I said, check your email. I sent you a confirmation for a flight home from your first port of call. A ticket for one, economy class. If you want to leave him, the option is there. If you want to stay and be his human shield, that is your choice. I reached for the mouse. John, my father shouted, do not hang up. We are in the middle of the ocean. You cannot leave us like this. I can. I said, I am very independent. Remember? I looked at them one last time. The sunset behind them was beautiful. Their lives in front of it were a wreck. Enjoy the cruise, I said, and I clicked end call. The screen went black. I sat there in the silence of my living room. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I could hear a dog barking down the street. My hands were not shaking. My heart was beating slow and strong. I picked up my glass of water and took a sip. It tasted better than any champagne they were drinking on that ship. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the streetlights. It was done. The bomb had detonated. Now, all I had to do was wait for the dust to settle and for the rebuilding to begin. But this time, I would be the architect. The return of the Lawson clan from the high seas was not the triumphant procession they had envisioned. There were no slideshows of the Amalfi Coast. No duty-free gifts handed out with condescending smiles, and certainly no stories about the captain's table. Instead, they returned to a reality that had been stripped of its varnish. They walked off that ship and straight into a wall of accountability that had been building for 30 years. I did not go to the airport to pick them up. I sent a car service, prepaid, because I am not cruel, but I am also no longer a servant. When they arrived at their house, the house that was now mortgaged to the hilt and vibrating with tension, the silence was apparently deafening. Brielle had taken the flight I booked. She arrived a day before our parents, looking less like a golden child and more like a refugee from her own life. She came to my condo first. She did not have her Louis Vuitton luggage. She just had a carry-on and swollen eyes. She told me that when she confronted Derek in the cabin after the video call, he had not apologized. He had not begged. He had simply panicked and tried to transfer the remaining funds from their joint account to an offshore entity he had set up months ago. He had a bag packed. Jean, she told me, sitting on my couch, clutching a mug of tea as if it were an anchor. Inside the lining of his suitcase, he had cash. He had a burner phone. He was never planning to come back to Savannah with me. He was going to dump me in Barcelona and disappear. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the sister I might have had if our parents hadn't turned us into competitors. I was just a prop. She whispered, I was the pretty wife who distracted everyone while he picked their pockets. I did not say I told you so. I did not need to. The truth was sitting between us, heavy and undeniable. The legal machinery moved with a terrifying efficiency. Ruth Calder was magnificent. She met the Apex Capital lawyers with a stack of affidavits and a threat of a fraud investigation that made them sweat through their expensive suits. Because I had proved the guarantee was forged. The bank's leverage over me was gone. They were left with a bad loan, a frozen asset, and a broker who was facing an investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. But we still had to deal with the house. I sat in Ruth's office a week after their return. The paperwork was ready. Here's the deal, Ruth said, sliding a check across the desk for me to sign. You pay off the principal of the bridge loan, $250,000, plus the penalties. It is a lot of money to clean up their mess. It is. I agreed. I picked up the pen. But, Ruth continued, raising a finger, in exchange for you clearing the debt and stopping the foreclosure, the title of the Hilton Head property transfers immediately and irrevocably into the November Trust. Your parents lose all claim. They lose the right to visit without permission. They lose the right to even step onto the driveway. I signed the check. It was the easiest money I had ever spent. Done, I said. The confrontation with my parents happened 2 days later. They requested a meeting. They came to my condo. It was the first time in 10 years they had visited me. They looked small. My father's bluster was gone, replaced by a gray, shaky fear. My mother looked old, her face etched with the bitterness of a gambler who lost the house on a pair of twos. Jean. My father started, his voice wavering. We are family. Blood is thicker than water. You cannot shut us out like this. We made a mistake. We were desperate. I looked at them. I was sitting in my armchair, the one I bought with my own salary. They were sitting on the edge of the sofa, uncomfortable in the space of the daughter they had dismissed. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. Dad, I said, forging my signature and risking my livelihood is not a mistake. It is a choice. But we are your parents, my mother cried, trying to summon tears. We gave you life. You have all this money now, $100 million. And you are going to let us lose everything? Derek is gone. The lawyers are calling us. We could lose our own house. I leaned forward. I am not letting you lose everything. I said, I paid off the loan on Grandma's house. I saved the one thing you tried to steal. But as for your house, your debts, your lifestyle?" I paused. "That fits your situation," I said, echoing the words she had said to me on Thanksgiving. My mother flinched as if I had slapped her. "Blood is not a license," I said, my voice hard. "It is not a permit to rob an 80-year-old woman and frame the child you think is too stupid to notice. You bet against me. You bet against Grandma. And you lost." I stood up. "I will not let you starve," I said, "because I am not you. But you will never have access to my accounts. You will never have control over Grandma's care. And you will never, ever call me independent with that sneer in your voice again." They left. They walked out of my door and out of my life as authority figures. They were just two people who owed a lot of money to a lot of creditors, and I was no longer their bank. The fallout rippled through the extended family. Aunt Tessa was the first to break the silence. She stood up at the next family gathering, one I did not attend, and told everyone exactly what she had seen in the hospital. She showed them the text messages. Cousins who had spent years laughing at Derek's jokes suddenly realized they had been laughing with a shark. The family divided. Those who valued integrity came to my side. Those who valued the illusion of wealth stayed with my parents, sinking slowly with the ship. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. It was Brielle's. I opened it. There was no request for a loan, no sob story about her credit card bills. "Jean." It read, "I spent my whole life thinking I was the winner because I got the applause. I thought you were the loser because you were in the background. I was wrong. I was not the winner. I was the performance. And you were the only one living a real life. I am sorry. Not because I need something, but because I finally see you. I am going to get a job. A real one. I might need you to teach me how to budget." I folded the letter. It was not full redemption, but it was a start, the true resolution. The moment where the air finally felt clean again came a month later. I drove to the Oak Bridge Care Center. I had a specialized medical transport waiting. I walked into room 312. Grandma Rose was sitting in her wheelchair, dressed in a soft blue cardigan I had bought her. She looked at me. "Is it time?" she asked. "It is time," I said. We drove to Hilton Head. The house looked different. I had hired a crew to clear the overgrown ivy. The shutters were painted a crisp, clean white, but the real change was in the back. I wheeled her through the garden gate. I had kept my promise. I had planted them. Hundreds of hydrangeas, blue, purple, pink, lining the fences, and roses, deep red roses, yellow roses, climbing roses wrapping around the trellis. The air smelled of salt and bloom. Grandma Rose sat there. Staring at the garden she thought she had lost forever. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the scent of her own home. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it." I said. She reached up and patted my hand. "You are a good gardener. Jean, you know how to weed out the rot." I stayed there for a week, settling her in with the 2 private nurses I had hired, kind women who actually listened to her stories. I sat on the porch, watching the ocean, feeling the weight of the last few months dissolve into the tide. But the universe had one final card to play. One final, devastating punchline that I discovered on a Tuesday afternoon while sorting through my old financial records for the tax audit Derek had warned me about. I was looking at my credit card statements from November. I had a supplementary card on my account, a card I had given to my mother 5 years ago for emergencies. She had sworn she lost it years ago, and I, being naive, had just locked it but never fully canceled the account, eventually unlocking it when she claimed she found it and might need it for groceries. I scanned the charges, a pharmacy charge, a grocery store run, and then I saw it. November 24th. Quick stop on Abercorn. Total, $2. I froze. I pulled up the date. November 24th, the day before Thanksgiving. My mother had gone to the quick stop. She had bought the lottery ticket. The ticket she gave me. The ticket she used to mock my poverty. But she didn't use her money. She used my card. She had used my own money to buy the insult. She was so cheap, so petty. that she couldn't even spend $2 of her own cash to humiliate me. She charged it to my account, thinking I wouldn't notice, thinking it was just a funny little jab. I stared at the statement. The ticket was technically mine before she even handed it to me. I had paid for it. I started to laugh. I laughed until my sides ached. I laughed until I was crying on my porch, startling the seagulls. It was the perfect, symmetrical justice of the universe. They tried to use my own resources to shame me, and in doing so, they handed me the keys to the kingdom. If she had used her own cash, she might have had a legal claim to the winnings. She could have argued it was a gift purchased with her funds, but she used my card. It was my purchase, my ticket, my fortune. They had literally bought their own destruction with my credit card. I wiped my eyes. I picked up my phone. I deleted the picture of the credit card statement. I didn't need to show it to them. Knowing it was enough, I walked back into the house. Grandma Rose was sleeping in her favorite armchair by the window. The house was quiet. The war was over. I did not destroy the Lawson family. I did not burn their house down or plant evidence. I simply stopped being the pillar that held up their lies. I stepped aside, and gravity did the rest. I am Jean Lawson. I am 34 years old. I am independent, and for the first time in my life, that word doesn't mean alone, it means free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and karma, please leave a comment below letting me know where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts on how the Lawsons got what they deserved. Don't forget to subscribe to the Nina Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story. See you in the next one.